My name is Nassim Sabs.
Let me ask you a question. Has anything ever happened to you that you couldn't explain? That made you feel sort of foolish when you tried to tell somebody about it? Well, if it has, you have plenty of company, as you'll soon see.
What if we could have the same digital powers in our world? You can already see glimmers of this, but I believe our children's children will grow up in a world devoid of 2D technology. And it's remarkable to dream of this world, a world where technology truly understands us, where we live, work, and communicate with tools that enhance the human experience, not machines that limit our humanity. So how do we get there? For me, the answer required looking at the problem from a different perspective. It required sensing the world from the perspective of a machine. If you're a machine trying to sense our world, how would you actually break the problem down? You would probably try to classify things as a human, an environment, or an object. But how would the machine then interact with reality? And I can think of three ways. First, as a machine, I would observe, or I would input reality. Speech recognition and biometric authentication are great examples of a machine interacting with humans from an input perspective. Secondly, as a machine, I could place digital information or output information into reality. Holograms are examples of a machine interacting with an environment from an output perspective. Finally, as a machine, I could exchange energy with the world via haptics. Now imagine being able to feel the temperature of a virtual object, or better yet, imagine pushing a hologram and having it push you back with equal force. With this perspective, we are able to collapse reality into a simple matrix.
During the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms. Which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I'd never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood, and I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was in fact a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was in fact a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than
other UFO researchers. You've written many authoritative books, and yet your perspective on the UFO issue seems rather unique in the sense that you don't seem to be jumping on the extraterrestrial visitors bandwagon.
That's what was the main point of disagreement with Steven Spielberg. When I met Steven Spielberg, he was about halfway through filming Close Encounters, and we had a long discussion about what UFOs could be. And of course, for him, the main point of the movie was entertainment, and it was appropriate for the UFOs to be extraterrestrial visitors. I think that from my own point of view, I'm going to be very disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet, because I think they could be something much more interesting.
Something from another dimension of space or time?
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet are capable of, appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
In your books, particularly your most recent book, Messengers of Deception, which is many years old, you suggest that UFOs are deliberately trying to manipulate our subconscious mind, to create a mythology in our culture about themselves, which is one of the reasons that they're both physical and concrete, yet very elusive at the same time. Do you still feel that way?
I think to answer that, I'm not trying to evade your question, but to answer that, you have to step back, you know, a little bit farther. What we know today about the UFO phenomenon is considerably more than we knew 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And we have to understand it at three different levels. And the first level is the physical level. And all we can say about UFOs at the physical level is that it's a lot of energy in a small space. In the space of this, if we could take the energy of a nuclear reactor and contain it within this studio, for example, you'd have something that would approximate what a UFO does. It's a lot of energy in a small space emitted through light energy and through pulsed microwave energy. The second level is what happens to witnesses, what would happen to you and me if we were close to that source of energy. And again, now we're beginning to understand the physiological and the psychological correlations of a close encounter.
Yes.
And those have to do with a loss of the sense of space, loss of orientation. I've had witnesses tell me we were driving north when they were, everybody knows they were driving south. They were disoriented at the time. Loss of a sense of time, people thinking that only 10 minutes went by and 3 hours went by. Very often effects on the skin, sunburns, I think that was shown in close encounters.
Yes.
Effects on the eyes, going from conjunctivitis to blindness, to temporary blindness in some cases.
And sometimes you've mentioned people have actually been healed of diseases.
There have been cases where after a UFO close encounter, it seems that the healing process had been sped up. Now there are known techniques now using electromagnetic radiation that will heal the fractures, for example, or will heal superficial wounds on the skin, but nothing that would heal as fast as, you know, the reported effects.
Yeah.
So we're beginning to understand at least the descriptions, you know, the symptoms of the exposure to whatever UFO is. And then there is a third level, which is where the level I was addressing in Messengers of Deception, which is a social level.
The impact on our culture.
Yes, and the impact on our belief systems. And at that level, and that's something that's very difficult to convey to the believers in UFOs, the believers in little green men from space, you know, that at that level it really doesn't matter whether UFOs are real or not. If enough people believe that something is real, then it is real in its effects.
In terms of its social reality.
In terms of the social reality, in terms of what people act according to their beliefs.
Yeah.
And that opens a question of, really at two levels, could the UFO phenomenon be manipulating us? Could it be a teaching system of some sort? Perhaps something that we are creating ourselves, perhaps a series of images that we are projecting. I think Carl Jung came very close to expressing that idea in one of his books. Or could it be manipulated purposely by people who have the technology to simulate UFO sightings? And people say, well, of course not. Who would do a thing like that? Well, I would remind you that during the Watergate investigation, it was discovered that there was a plan originated in the White House to surface a submarine off the coast of Cuba and paint the second coming of Christ over the island of Cuba using holograms. Which is well within our technology today. The idea was that since there is a large Catholic population in Cuba, they would be so upset by this vision that this would saturate the communication channels, the telephone system in Cuba, long enough for an invasion to take place.
How interesting. I'd never heard of that.
Well, I think that's a classic in psychological warfare, but that kind of manipulation is well understood, and I have personally investigated several apparently genuine UFO cases where there was in fact a manipulation. My conclusion, the conclusion of scientists working with me, was that there was in fact a manipulation taking place, and that it was not a hoax on the part of the witnesses, but a hoax on the part of somebody much better organized than them.
So there are possibly all of these levels going on simultaneously.
Today, today, with the current technology, that would be possible. One of my interests, as you know, has been to look at ancient sightings, old sightings before World War II, for example, when there is really no confusion with modern technology. And if people described, say, in 1925 or in 1825, a disk flying through the air, then it can only have been very, very few phenomena could have produced it.
And there have been some well-documented sightings going back to the 19th century, for example.
There was, starting in 1896 and going into the spring of 1897, there was a remarkable wave of sightings of airships. Those were described as oval objects flying through the sky with lights on them. And of course, the people in those days could only compare it to dirigibles, could only compare them to airships. And those objects were capable of doing all the things that UFOs do today, including taking off very quickly and making 90-degree turns and landing and occupants coming out of them. And if nothing else, I think this is part of our folklore. This is something that we should be studying as part of our folklore.
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
Hey!
Aliens are not your friends. Visitors that will come to this planet, people will look at and see something not from here. They will see an alien. And it will not be your friends. You've been told, but you won't believe. You're mystified at the thought that something else is out there besides you. And there are interdimensional beings. But that is where angels are. That's where heaven's at. That's where hell's at. It's a whole different dimension. And there are different dimensions where each one can be found.
He's awesome. He is such a nice guy, and I was kind of intimidated at first because I'd been watching Keir Sedgwick forever, and I'm like, oh God, I don't know, do I have the chops? And
I know it sounds crazy.
Hey!
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
In the next scene, you're going to see a nice coral bottom. And you see that an octopus would stand out very easily there if you couldn't use your camouflage, use your skin to change color and texture. Here's some algae in the foreground. And an octopus. Isn't that amazing? Now Roger spooked him, so as he took off.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Open your mind.
Hey!
Aliens are coming. Are you prepared?
Hey!